Aphelocoma Chapter 2 The Night Jar. Aph moved through the grey tunnel as fast as they could, but it narrowed at several points, so the only way to progress was to move sideways, shuffling their feet on the sandy floor of the cave. It went on much longer than Aph had expected. If not for the encouragement from Acanthus, Aph would have turned around and said, "Screw it, I'll take my chances with the owl woman person." Imagining that, admittedly incredibly foolish, decision kept Aph from thinking about how the cold stone of the earth seemed to press in on them. Past the first 10 feet or so, the passageway was dark, a pure dark that was utterly inscrutable to the eye. Aph needed to use their hands to keep from running head first into jutting sections of rock or sudden turns. "How far does this tunnel go on for? And do you even know where it leads?" Aph was trying to be polite, but the adrenaline of the chase had worn off by this point, and their rational brain was now back in the saddle. "It goes on for longer than you'll think it will, but we won't get where we're going till you stop waiting for the destination to arrive. You gotta let your mind release its white-knuckle grip on what you think reality is, and just let the tunnel take us where it's a-taking us." Aph wanted to retort, to push back on that idea, but some part of them paused. Aph stopped in place. The moment later, Acanthus's hand bumped into Aph's back. "Why'd you stop?" "I'm taking a moment to loosen my grip on reality." God, I can't believe I just said that out loud. Just give me a second. Aph closed their eyes. Not that it made much of a difference. And something in them stirred. Some unfamiliar feeling, which was not altogether alien. Aph felt the tension in their body melt away. They squared their feet beneath their shoulders, facing directly in the direction they thought the tunnel was pointed. They let their arms drop to their side, and they slowly took a deep breath in. "I'm not in control," they thought to themselves. "The tunnel will take me where I need to go. I have to trust that. I am choosing to believe that. All I need to do is walk forward." With that, Aph exhaled and stepped forward. Then another step, and another. Their eyes still closed, they began confidently walking forward in the dark. Suddenly they had no need to feel for the walls of the cave. It seemed the cave itself was large enough to accommodate Aph's height and width quite comfortably. Acanthus felt this shift and was stunned. "I'll be damned," he thought. "This young fella—" He caught himself mentally. "This young person really must be the missing Aphelocoma to so confidently control the passageway and hit there first try." Acanthus exhaled sharply and moved forward to follow Aph. "I swear, you old codger, you'll get this right eventually," Acanthus promised himself. It was only a few more minutes before Acanthus could see a dim light ahead of them. "Hey, Aph, you can open your eyes now." Aph wasn't sure how the old man knew their eyes had been closed, but they opened them to see that same light. A minute more, and the two exited the tunnel into a large, cavernous room. It was circular, and seemed to be cut from the same nondescript gray rock as the tunnel. The room seemed to have around a dozen tunnels branching off, each one with a small pictograph carved into the rock above it. Aph turned around to see the tunnel they had just exited was labeled with what looked like a stylized lightning bolt. Aph looked more closely at the others and noticed that some of them were painted in. Spread equidistant around the room, there was a skull, which was painted black, a snowflake painted red, a rising sun painted yellow, and a sprig of leaves painted white. Aph looked up, and what they saw nearly knocked them back on their ass. Partway up, the stone dome was a cutoff, showing what Aph could only assume was some kind of night sky, which was lighting up this chamber. There, slowly turning about in the circular opening, were nebulae arcing across the heavens, thousands of stars gleaming and twinkling, dust clouds obscuring some of the details and leaving black splotches. As Af stared up in wonder, they took in all the complexity and wonder of it. They thought they could see some underlying pattern, a web, almost, of star clusters linking together and netting the sky, leaving voids in between where stars shone even brighter for lack of competition. Acanthus patted Af on the arm. "Marvelous, ain't it? I wish we could stay longer, but we need to get a move on, Your Highness." Af looked down to the man. The use of title confused them, but it was another puzzle piece that was slotting into a picture, and Af wasn't sure they liked what they saw. Acanthus gestured towards one of the tunnels, not quite on the opposite side of the room. The lightning bolt tunnel was situated between the black skull and the white sprig of leaves. The tunnel Acanthus was pointing to was marked with what looked like a bipedal bear, and it was situated between the yellow sunrise and the white sprig of leaves. "After you, Your Highness, and remember what I said in the last tunnel. Same applies here." Af steeled himself, strode across the chamber, and paused in front of the new tunnel. They swallowed hard. Having the time to actually think about what was going on only served to ratchet up their anxiety. They could feel their blood pumping loudly in their ears as their heart raced faster and faster in response to seeing the void gaping open in front of their face. "You know, Acanthus, you're gonna owe me a really good explanation after we get wherever it is you're taking me. If we survive, that is." "That I certainly do. But you've done quite well for yourself so far." Acanthus paused before finishing the thought quickly. "Other than all those scratches on your back and your head, but don't worry. I'll tell folks it was a dozen owl assassins, hundreds even. Wouldn't want anyone thinking you was scared of a single bird." At this, Af slowly turned back around to face Acanthus. The old man was stood maybe 10 feet behind them, leaning on his staff, wielding the widest shit-eating grin that Af had ever seen on a person before. All at once, the tension Af had been building over the last hour broke, and they started laughing. A slow chuckle, at first, building quickly to a full cackle. They bent over, clutching their stomach, suddenly wildly entertained by the reality that they'd nearly been killed by just some bird. The laughing just kept going. Tears were welling up and overflowing their eyes. Af fell to their knees. Their stomach was starting to hurt. Their cheeks were aching from laughing, and suddenly the stinging from the cuts throbbed painfully. They tried to slow down, taking a few deep breaths. Acanthus stepped over to his young acquaintance, reaching down to help them stand. Af, unsure of the old man's balance, accepted the hand, but tried not to lean too hard on it as they stood. After taking a moment to regain their composure, they looked back down to the man. "Owl assassins? Did you like it?" The smile was back. "I loved it." Af took a breath. "All right, let's get going." A moment more, and the two strode into the tunnel, being swallowed by the darkness in mere moments. Af had a slightly easier time with this tunnel compared to the first. It only narrowed briefly before Af was able to regain their hold on that mysterious feeling. That seemed to do the trick, as there was plenty of space for the rest of the walk. In fact, as they neared the exit, Acanthus noted the bare rock floor occasionally broke to reveal a dirty and decaying tile floor. Af either didn't notice or chose to block it out to maintain their state of mind. Acanthus, however, knew its significance, and this both impressed and concerned him in equal measures. He made a mental note to try and limit the young No, prince is definitely a gendered term. Lord? Acanthus wasn't 100% positive on that, but he was reasonably sure that was masculine as well. Heir? That'll have to do. Acanthus made a mental note to try and limit the young heir's travel through the tunnel. Acanthus completed this thought just before Aph walked directly into the terminal wall of the tunnel. Much like the entrance under the theater, this exit was a thin crack in the rock, just wide enough to squeeze through. After taking a moment to reorient themselves and recollect what dignity they could find, Aph nodded toward the opening. I take it this is the way out? Ever perceptive, ye are, my young companion. Aye, that's the way out. This time I'll be going first. Age before beauty and all that. Aph let out a chuckle and stepped aside, gesturing for the older man to go through. Acanthus squeezed in sideways, gently making his way through. After a few feet, he reached the edge, but paused. Acanthus leaned his head out. He looked left, he turned to look right, and he let out 3 sharp, high-pitched whistles that made a sort of sipped sound. He turned his ear out and seemed to be listening. There was a moment of silence as Aph also strained to listen. They didn't know what to expect, but Acanthus sure seemed to be expecting a reply. Just as Aph was sure no reply would come, a series of quiet, warbling woo-woos sounded off, and they came from high up, moving through the trees. The coast is clear. Come on, Aph, let's shake a tail feather. Acanthus chuckled at his own joke and squeezed out the last few inches. Aph followed, growing ever more unsure of what in the world was going on. Once the two were both out of the darkness, Aph finally got a chance to look around. They were on a flat rock platform, identical to the one they entered the first tunnel from. In fact, the foliage around them was nearly identical as well. Aph grew uneasy as a creeping and confusing sort of dread crept up their throat. Where'd that old bird go? Acanthus pondered aloud, casting his eyes up into the treetops. Aph looked down to the old man to see his features suddenly quite different. Where once he possessed a graying brown hair, now feathers seemed to sprout from his head. It was a patchwork of that same brown and gray, but as it approached the nape of his neck, it morphed into a light green. The backs of his hands that rested on the tip of his walking staff seemed to be coated in a light down, the same light green at his wrists, which darkened towards his fingers. His eyes seemed larger too, and entirely black. Aph took a step back, leaning onto the rock face behind them for support. Who are you calling an old bird, you old coot? A feminine voice whispered out above them from somewhere in the trees. A small bird swooped down, landing a few feet in front of Acanthus. It was maybe 9 inches from its short and thin beak to tail. It was covered in a richly patterned coat of feathers, mostly black, with gray flecks, but with some bold white stripes toward the tips of its wings, and spots of a dark orange around its chest, head, and the leading edges of its wings. The bird spoke. I am a fair bit younger than you, I will remind you. The same voice? Aph thought to himself. From a bird? Again? This was not good. I must have let go of reality for good back there. Aph was unsteady. The small bird looked past Acanthus at Aph, sizing them up. Are you sure this is the one? They still appear to be fully human. The bird pulled its head down and began to extend its wings in jerking motions as if shaking off water in a bird bath. As it did this, it grew. Through a flurry of feathers and motion, Aph watched as this small bird transformed into a woman. Sort of. She appeared to be as human as Acanthus did now. Her black and gray feathers covered her head, blending almost seamlessly with her dark complexion. Her skin showed the signs of a long and healthy life, much as Acanthus's did, though hers lacked the telltale signs of hours spent out in the sun. She now wore a dark robe of similar design to Acanthus's, and just above the neckline, Af could see a hint of her stark orange plumage. Her eyes were similar to Acanthus's, larger than would be expected for the size of her face, and coal black, save the dazzling speckles of starlight that reflected off them. She leveled. "Hello, young man. My name is Phelana. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I apologize for the difficult night you must have had." Af could only shakily nod their head, now gripping the rough stone to keep themselves on their feet. "Oh, Faye, this one's not a he. They aren't fond of them masculine nouns. I wanted to tell you that first." Af shifted their eyes from one bird person to the other. Phelana seemed to let out a quiet "ah" to Acanthus's comment. "My apologies, young person. I shouldn't have assumed." Phelana gave the sort of smile you make when you've made an honest mistake, but inside you're kicking yourself with embarrassment. Af struggled to keep a sense of vertigo from building to a breaking point. "No, it's okay. It happens all the vertigo and unease and panic all reached a conjoined crescendo as Af felt the ground drop out from beneath them. They felt like they were floating, weightless, peaceful. That lasted all of the half-second it took for them to crumple onto the hard rock platform, much like a stack of various sacks of various potatoes would collapse when toppled over. Oh dear, Acanthus, did you not warn them?" Phelana continued speaking, but it was lost to Af as they blacked out. The last semi-coherent thought which passed through Af's mind in that moment was, well, fuck a duck. I should note, dear reader, just for clarity's sake, that no ducks have appeared in the story I'm recounting to you. Yet.